Whistling shadows, echoes in the night, soft and haunting, flickering light, strings pull tight.
Well, good afternoon. It's me again, Germaine Murray from the Humanities Department at Maryville University, and I'm here with a colleague of mine and a friend, a very close friend of mine. His name is John Wickersham. John Wickersham is a philosopher. He's also a photographer. He's also a poet. He's also a writer, and he's here to talk to us about his experiences. He wrote a book called Morning is Always Nigh, A Colorado Boyhood. I've known you ever since I came here, since 1991, and he's been with Maryville University for 61 years. And he's been a huge influence on my life and my professional life for sure. So it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
It's very nice to have you.
One of the points of honor in my career was that Dr. Germaine Murray and I were able to save you.
Yes, you were.
And that was so awful. And I'm so proud that we did.
I'm glad you did too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the first year I was here.
Yeah.
I mean, full time.
Right.
Yeah. You did save me. Mm-hmm. I've always thanked you for it.
It's hard to imagine how things could be different, but for some simple little thing. Yeah. Some simple little thing. I'm here at Maryville as a result of a simple little thing. I was a second-year graduate student at St. Louis U, without a care in the world, had a fellowship so everything was paid for. I was in my room, which is rare because you try not to be in your room as much as possible. And, of course, the rooms had telephones, and the phone rang. It was a professor of mine from the previous semester, from the spring semester, whose name was Father Maurice Holloway. He was a brilliant philosophy professor whom I had really struck a kind of an intellectual bargain with. And he said, "John, would you be interested in a teaching position?" I said, "I'd never thought about that. What are we talking about?" He said, "A little women's college out Highway 40 called Maryville College. And one of their professors came down, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in July.
I didn't know this.
And she's dead. And so they need somebody to take up some of the slack of her teaching. Would you be able to teach a course in ancient philosophy, do you think?" And I said, "Well, what time is it?" And it turns out that I could do it. It was a time I could come out here. And I said, "What do I do?" "Go out there," he said, "and just look stupid, and they'll find you and help you and tell you what you need to do." So the point I was making about serendipity, had I not been in my room, and it was highly unlikely that I would be there, he would have simply gone to the next name on his list.
Yeah.
And
here you are.
The 61
How many years later? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're 61, I'm 64.
Yeah.
So I was, that's amazing. I was 3. Anyway, that's too funny. But you're right. The little things, you and Dr. Sherry, you and Jerry, I saw him last spring. It was great to see him. He was a marvelous English teacher here at Maryville.
He was a great loss to our faculty.
Great loss. Retired too early. But he's been doing very well. I'm glad to see it. He looks great. Everybody. Yeah. So, that's a good story too. I felt like, I remember when you guys saved my job.
Yeah. I
remember feeling like George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life.
We did the same thing later on with Rodko Jansky.
Yes, we did. I got to be in on that.
Oh, that was so delicious.
It was very delicious.
When Dennis Walker pushed across the table to the president the retirement or the policy that governed people being fired, and he didn't know it existed, that this whole thing had gone down totally incorrectly, and he said, "Well, I'll be goddamn sure that this is not going to happen again." So we saved Rodko for another 10 years or so.
Yes, I know.
It's funny because
God rest his soul, by the way.
God rest his soul.
I used to have lunch with him quite frequently, and He was a very unusual but a very bright guy.
He was one of the most distinguished members of our faculty.
Yes, and was instrumental in the writing of the current Czech Constitution.
Yes.
And I think of him often.
Yeah,
I think of those conversations we had at lunch, because I remember he used to love to pile his plate, and I especially loved his plaid jackets.
Yeah, and his Pope shoes.
That's right. His Pope shoes. Oh, those were the days. Yes, I got to be in on saving him. And I will say this before we move on to the issue of the things we wanted to talk about today. I will say this, that that early year of mine, that first year of mine full time, was a very formative year for me, because it set the tone for how I would act when it came to defending faculty as well. Yes. And I haven't done what you have done or Jerry did at all, but I have helped colleagues.
Oh, yes, of course you have.
Anyway, I've always really appreciated that, because that's how I learned how to be a faculty member. So there you go.
There is no training of professors.
No.
You're just supposed to pick it up by some kind of osmotic process.
Precisely. And you guys were great, really great mentors and really good. I remember you saying to me at one time when I was fighting for my job, I remember saying, you got to do this too for yourself. You got to go in there and face that guy down.
Oh, yeah.
And I did on a couple of occasions. And so, and by the way, that has really formed me. It's never fun to do something like that, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate. Anyway, so what we're here to do today to talk about is the morning is always nigh, and also, as I told you when we were talking about what we were going to discuss today, I've always been very interested. I too am. I would say I'm both a Westerner and a Midwesterner. So. Yes. I'm from Colorado, and I'm also was raised for a good part of my life in Nebraska. And so you and I share that Midwestern and Western.
Topophilia.
Yeah, we definitely do. We definitely do. And it's also a sensibility, I think, that we share. And so I'm really interested in all of that when it comes to literature. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested in how the landscape and the physical, as you say, topophilia, how it influences people develop and grow, and what they write, and their poetry, their fiction, their nonfiction. So that's what we're here to talk about today in many ways. And you came out with a book. How long has it been now since the book came out?
2016.
Oh my God, it's already been 8 years.
Yeah.
It's already been 8 years. And so tell for the audience, what's the book about?
Well, the book has a very interesting backstory. One of my children was really struggling and finding a place in the world. He wanted to live in the West like his brothers and sister. But living in the West, especially in a mountain town like Durango, Colorado, is very difficult. If you have a profession, if you're a physician, attorney, physical therapist, that sort of thing, of course you can hang your shingle out and be in business. But for the rest of the people who live there, the economy is entirely driven by tourism, and it's quite seasonal. And so almost all the jobs are in service industries. So a young man who goes out there, despite the fact he may be well educated and very cultured, he ends up being a bartender. And my son was trapped in that.
This is Jamie,
yes,
right?
Yeah, trapped in that. And I could see it was really crushing his spirit. So I wanted to do something for him. I never aspired to be a writer, but I thought, well, how about if I try to cobble together some kind of a book? Because Jamie's a gifted artist. He majored in art in college, and he's really quite amazing. I said, Jamie, what about this? I'll write the book, and you can illustrate it. And that saved Jamie.
I didn't know that.
Yep. We collaborated on the book, and that made us then have a get-together almost nightly and talk about it. And whenever there were vacations, academic vacations, we'd work on it together and so on until it was finally done. And by that time, Jamie had made his mind up to become a teacher. Went back, got an education degree. Well, long story short,
Got certified, right?
he is now a middle school social studies teacher in Durango. Recently won the Teacher of the Year award
Oh my God.
and is the effective pope of his school. It just has blossomed. Loves the kids. Who ever thought you could really love being a middle school teacher? That sounds like a description of hell. But anyway, that's the story.
I had Jamie in class.
Yeah.
And I always thought he would be a teacher. I never told him that.
Yeah.
But I had him in class, and we've had a lot of our students of faculty in class, but
Yeah.
Jamie was a standout. I had him in English 498, and I remember where he sat. Anyway, that's such a great story.
Yeah.
That's such a great story. So that's a great origin for the book, too.
People have wondered about the title because it is a little odd.
Yes, it is.
It comes, of course, from a Christmas carol. I love you, Lord Jesus, come down from the sky and stand by my cradle till morning is nigh. So, morning is always nigh. That's the whole point of the book. What
Right.
most people don't see who read the book until I tell them is that there are several philosophic themes that are pursued through it. One of which is divine providence.
Oh, yeah.
The other of which is free choice.
Yes.
Those are in all of the stories. It's not just a fun book about a boy's adventures. I had more serious intent, but anyway. So yeah,
So would you say it's an autobiographical book?
quasi.
Quasi.
Since the stories are all stories of events that happened to me, but I've disguised them by the names of the characters and so on, which are the names of my
Right.
children. But they're all de facto true in detail. But I did not want to present this as an autobiography for some person. Who the hell wants to read an autobiography of essentially a beat-up old teacher? Whereas if I were a beat-up old politician, that would be okay.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't want to read that either.
No.
But anyway, but I wouldn't. I do. No. But no, that's really interesting. So, and you never considered fiction writing, and so you kind of came to it because
Yes,
you
I
wanted to
did.
help out
I
Jamie.
had to do something. I had to do something.
Well, it's pretty lyrical in
Yeah.
many spots. It's a lyrical kind of book, and which is very related to your poetry, because your poetry is also beautiful and lyrical and full of different kinds of emotion.
Oh, you're
and-
most kind.
and- no, they absolutely.
Funny things have happened as a result of the book. One of the letters that was written to Amazon, where people attest to
How good a book it is.
having read a book, was from two women who said, "We love this book because we're in it." It so happens that there's one story about a skating party in which two girls fell through the ice. And of course, they said, "We were the girls who fell through the ice." So you never know.
It's amazing that they found it.
Yeah.
Wow. Have any other of the people who figure, or the characters who figure in the book, have they gotten in touch with you?
Oh, off and on, yes. A lot of people have. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Well, once it got out into my high school class and my college
Oh,
class,
very
you know,
good.
then it passed from hand to hand to hand to hand. So yeah.
So are you gonna do another?
No, I've had it with writing. Well, you know, Wordsworth was finished at 28. So my muse just kind of left me. I remember when I was really...
Don't you still write poetry?
No?
Oh, John, you should absolutely.
Well, you know, I'd love to, Germaine, but it's
The
like
muse
that.
is not-
It's just, when I was really into writing poetry, I could hardly wait for supper to be over and for Barbara and I to spend some time, and I could go up and write. I have that
That's last year.
need is just gone. I have lots of poetical ideas, but, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I really do think you should put together.
Well, I have a lot of poems. I
You
probably
do. You do.
probably have 60 or so that are, in my judgment, worthy of consideration. But what has been really fun with respect to the conjunction of my background in poetry and all that I do is the privilege of team teaching a class with Peter Henderson, our piano professor.
I was going to talk to you about that.
He is the closest thing to a distinguished professor that we have here at Maryville.
I agree, 100%.
And he's got a PhD in musicology. He's a world-class pianist. He's a pianist for the St. Louis Symphony. And so being on a team with him is just intimidating. So the course is the words and the melody, and we look at song, and Peter talks about the rudiments of musicology, and I talk about fundamental prosody, and then we study poems, and we study musical compositions, and art songs, and all the like. But wow, you talk about intimidation. And the guy is so unassuming and so humble.
Oh, I know it is. He is the he absolutely should be, in my view, should be given a title, if you will, or a chair. We should.
Oh, he should. He should be.
Chair. We should be. One of the reasons why I chose this is my paltry little contribution to Maryville, but one of the reasons I want to do these podcasts, and they're just essentially conversations, is because I tell you, I really think what's missing in our culture, our academic culture, but also in the culture at large, is meaningful conversations about things that matter.
Yes.
Things that matter, and I'm not talking about all the noise out in the culture right now. I'm just talking about beauty and
truth and goodness,
literature and truth and goodness. That's exactly
beauty,
right. These are things that constitute the inner life that we don't talk about. We certainly don't talk about it when it comes to our teaching.
Right.
We talk about methodologies and pedagogy and all that, but we don't talk about what really has to be at the bottom of why you're doing what you're doing in the classroom. And it seems to me that class, the words and the melody, I've never sat in on a class. I probably should, but it's something that really has been attractive to me, because what you're doing is you're connecting again. Obviously, you're connecting music to poetry. Right. And for the 99.9 repeating million or time that poetry has existed, oral and then literal poetry, it's been connected to song.
Of course.
It's been connected to music.
The Latin word for poems is carmina.
That's exactly
and
right.
They were song. And they were song.
And they were song. Absolutely, absolutely. And this may sound, I don't know how much you agree with me here or not, but I was so pleased years ago, I forget how many years ago it was now, when Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize.
Yes, absolutely.
I'll tell you what,
well.
I was thrilled, and I was thrilled because he's a minstrel.
Yeah.
And he's a songwriter.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that when you say I couldn't wait when I was writing poetry after dinner to get upstairs and write. He says in his biography, or his autobiography, he says, there were times in my life, very extended times, when he said, I had to be writing.
Yeah.
It was absolutely, I had to be doing it.
Right.
I know when Peter Henderson told me one time, he said, if I don't play the piano during the day, I couldn't be away from a piano.
Yeah.
And that, but what I love about getting back to what Dylan said is that they've reconnected. The Nobel Committee reconnected that connection between music and oral.
Well, the interfingering of all the arts is always wonderful to deal with.
Yes, I agree.
I have frequently into our class, I have injected aesthetics, where the occasion presents itself to talk about serious principles in the philosophy of the beautiful.
Yes.
The hardest part, Germaine, and I hope I'm not crossing a line here, and this applies not just to this class, but to all classes, is how do you how do you make this mean anything to anyone? In his book, The Grammar of Assent, Cardinal Newman has a wonderful distinction that he draws between what he calls notional and real knowledge.
Uh-huh.
So notional knowledge would be, for example, just the superficial knowledge of the logical interconnection of something. For example, that in a based-in number system, 2 + 2 = 4. Okay, I understand that. How do you pass from that on to something where you know something that reaches in and touches the depth of your being,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can move someone that'll move you to tears?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get kids from the pure? I shouldn't call them kids, but I do. How do you get the kids from a completely notional view of what they're doing, where they're just ingesting information they need it for credentialing or whatever, to having it really impress itself upon their most inner self? There was, this is hard, but the other day we were in that class looking at a poem by Longfellow called The Cross of Snow. And it's a beautiful sonnet, really, really beautiful. But in that sonnet, he says that here in this room, she died, referring to his wife. The two of them are sitting in the living room in front of the fireplace, and typical of her age, the 1860s. She was wearing multiple crinoline petticoats, which of course are acetate and highly inflammable. A spark jumped out of the fireplace and landed on her, and she was consumed in a ball of flame right before his eyes. Here in this room she died, he says, and soul more white, never through martyrdom of fire was led to its repose, nor can in books be read the legend of a life more benedict. And I looked at the kids.
They haven't lived enough yet.
Yes.
They haven't lived enough.
I said, look, I don't know you that well, but I suspect that none of you has actually ever been at the bedside of a dying person.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that it's awful beyond belief to listen to the death rattle and to see them finally become quiet and die.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never, ever forget that. And I said, recently I had the experience of doing that twice. And I said, look, that's the whole point. It's not just a damn poem. This is what he's telling you, what it's like. So you have to internalize those things to make them be real knowledge in Newman's sense. How do you get kids to go from just flitting along at what I call the credit cafeteria, getting a scoop of this and a scoop of that, scoop of that?
That's the perfect way of putting it. That's the perfect
very
way of putting
hard.
It. Well, yeah, I completely understand. You and I are of the same mind and heart when it comes to what the education. See, education is become so instrumentalized. You know, it's not about the formation of the person. It's not personalist anymore.
Right.
And I work hard at this same thing every day. One of the things that has helped me with students over the years is a great book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And I just think it's a masterpiece.
It is. I love it.
Because, and by the way, I gave that as Christmas gifts one time. And I use that a lot. By the way, I crib from it a lot because I too have the same experience. One of the reasons I'm interested in genre studies is because I want to know where a genre came from and what's happening in the culture and also in the author that popularizes this. My latest thing I'm really interested in is Ambrose Bierce, who I just love. Yeah. Ambrose Bierce. And
isn't that the Owl Creek?
The Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
Right.
And he wrote a series of stories about the frontier that are really scary, but not titillating scary. They're about, and what I'm interested in is why did he write those stories, And what is he saying, too, about what's happened to him, and then also what's happening to the culture. So Man's Search for Meaning, in my view, is so relevant because what Viktor Frankl essentially says is you have to develop an inner life.
Exactly. That saved him.
It saved him from being exterminated.
From simply dying, just withering.
You have to have an inner life, and real education is about developing that so you can become ultimately some kind of professional. But the other thing I think we fail to do is to teach kids or model for students that your job is not your life.
Yes, exactly.
And your life is constituted by so much more than that.
I often say, I'm sorry.
No, please go.
I often tell my students that when all is said and done and you've graduated and you've become certified, be it as an actuary or a nurse or a physical therapist or a teacher, whatever it be, what has it done for you? What you've become is a member of the minor league of a profession. What did you get out of your education?
Right.
How has it changed you? What did it give to you personally?
Right.
That's the part that really matters.
Yes. My mother always said to me, we were having a big argument when I was an undergraduate about a very serious argument about, I think I was 19, and we were sitting in the car in J.C. Penney's parking lot where I worked as an internal auditor and as a his girl Friday type of person at J.C. Penney's. And my mother, we were having an argument, and she said, your education and your religion are the most important possessions you possess. And she goes, education is not about what you're going to get from it, how much money you're going to make. She goes, it's one of your most prized possessions. It's yours.
Yes.
So how has it changed you, developed you? She was shaking. She was so, not with anger, but trying to pound this into my head. It was an important moment for me because I was lost in many ways. And so that's the way my parents saw it.
Yeah.
So that's the way I see it.
I always tell my students on the very first day of class, I've done this from the very beginning, that I extend to you all the offer of friendship. If you want to be my friend, we can be friends. And I leave it to them because in every class, not many, maybe one or two, will do that. Will go out of their way to seek me out, to come and talk to me, to ask if they do. And we end up, of course, being friends. Tonight, I'm meeting with a group called the Great Conversations, which is all Maryville alums. And those are all people who were my friends from my undergraduate classes.
Is that Greg?
Yeah, Greg Daniger.
Very good. Yeah. Who are the other ones?
Well, there's a whole bunch of them. Darren Sorrell.
Yes.
Trying to think of some of the women. Jeannie Burke.
Oh, Jeannie, very good.
So anyway,
very good.
It's a whole bunch from all of the years.
Very good.
And it's really, really wonderful to be together with them and see this is what I've given my life to.
Yes.
These are the results of my handiwork.
Yes.
Not that I'm exclusively responsible, but I've contributed to them in their search for being greater human beings.
For people. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Aristotle says, that we have to strain every nerve to live according to the best things in us. Pursue excellence. Absolutely. Do that.
Yeah. True. And again, it's always been that same kind of philosophy has always been behind what I try to do here at Maryville. And you've been a big part of that. Do you remember that class we taught with you and Norm and me and
Dennis? Yeah, that was a great class.
Oh my God. Those people in that class still talk about that class.
Yeah.
The alumni still talk about that class where we had all of us in there
That was wonderful.
talking about all kinds of things.
Yes, whatever popped up, so to speak.
Whatever popped
like
up. They had to do
whack-a-mole.
readings, but whatever popped up, and it was so interesting. It was a great experience when we did that. And we had quite a few kids in there, too.
We did.
Yeah, we had quite a few kids. How many students do you have in the melody and words class?
I think it's 13.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Do you teach that every year now?
Yes, once a year we do.
Yeah, I'd like to drop in sometime.
We have had a problem this year with attendance.
Yeah, so is everybody.
And
I don't understand. I am having the same problems. By the way, you're not alone.
Yeah.
A lot of people are having the same problems with attendance.
Yeah, it's hard to make them see there is an attendance policy here.
Yes, it's very hard to see, and it's. I think it's post-COVID, but I think there's also something else going on. So.
A lot of it is post-COVID.
A lot of it is post-COVID. I think everybody is having that. I mean, I show up to class and I go, what is going on?
Yeah.
I mean, but people on the hallway that you and I are on, they all say the same thing.
Yeah.
So we're all going through that. How long have you been teaching that class? With
I think maybe 8 or 9 years.
Oh, wow. God, the time has flown by.
Yes, it has.
It has really flown by. There's a great book about the connection between poetry and song that John Holland wrote about it's called Untuning the Sky.
It's a good title.
It's a wonderful title. And he talks about when the connection to song begins in especially English poetry, the disconnection from song. And he talks about the printing press and the emphasis on the visual as opposed to the hearing, and the emphasis on the space on the page. And of course, he talks about the metaphysicals, and he talks about poetry. Who's the metaphysical poet that wrote The Altar?
Oh yes,
Oh God,
William. No.
Oh, why can't I
I
think
know
of his
it's
name? That's a
memory's
sin that I
awful,
can't think of his name. But anyway, but he talks about how now in the Renaissance, where you have this beginning of this disconnection, and all these massive changes in art and literature take time to finish up. But I'd say that if you wouldn't mind me saying so, I'd say that in really contemporary poetry, white space on the page is more important than words and melody.
I have had, unfortunately, a lot of arguments because I don't like to get into them about poetry, but I regret that free verse has become the fashion, which it is. I know submitting my poetry for publication, a number of different magazines rejected it because it's too sing-song. What they want to see.
They don't know what sing-song is.
Well, that means metrical and rhyming.
I know, but they don't really know what sing-song is. Yeah.
But they're accustomed to seeing things that, that if you tell your computer to justify them on the left-hand edge, that it reads like a prose paragraph. Is this a poem? What's poetical about it?
Well, exactly.
It looks like a poem when it's set up, printed.
Exactly.
That way.
Yes. With all of our talk about diversity, the diversity of poetry or form.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that doesn't. Whatever. I won't get into that either. But they don't really know what sing-songy is. That's my problem. I mean.
Oh my God.
No, it's.
One woman made a long comment on one of the poems that I sent in, criticism. And she took one line and she said, what is with this line? It was the last line in a sonnet I really like, which said that God is all, indeed, that all is God. What is that? I wrote back.
It's not hard to figure out.
That's called a chiasmus, which is a classical figure of speech.
Yes, it is.
And don't you know that?
No.
She's an editor of a poetry magazine. I are a poet.
I are a poet, yes. That's how they do. Yeah. No, no, I really do think, getting back to this idea, I think your poems need to be in a book.
Well, we hope. My son Jamie and I have kind of a plan afoot to
Oh, I'm so glad.
do another illustration thing where he would do a lozenge that would appear on every page, a little drawing.
Oh, yeah.
Relate to the subject of the book.
That would be lovely.
We're talking about that.
Is it true too that Peter Henderson is doing he's putting some of your poems to music?
I don't know. I've heard that.
Maybe I let the cat out of the bag.
No. I think he said that publicly, but I don't ask him about it.
Okay, no, I haven't asked him about it either.
So
But
it would be nice. It would be a great honor.
We could have some sort of really cool.
Great honor.
We could have we could have a cool event around that. That would be wonderful.
You know, to get back to the book, we kind of got off that.
I know we did, but that's okay.
The roots of the book, of course, you're referring to your own upbringing as both Western and Midwestern, as mine as well is. I grew up on the prairie, right up against the Rocky Mountains.
Right.
My dad was a ranch kid. He was an only child living on a ranch on the Gunnison River on the western slope in Colorado. And, you know, he had an enormous influence on my life. I loved my father. Well, more than you probably ought to love a person. He was just the most wonderful man in every respect. Well, like any human being, of course, he had his flaws.
Oh,
but the things that my dad did that as a boy growing up really thought were wonderful. Expert shot with rifle, pistol, and shotgun. Great fly fisherman. Great pool shooter.
He was a pilot too, wasn't he?
And he was a lifetime pilot, 15,000 miles.
And he was a chef.
Oh yeah, he'd done it all.
Oh my Lord.
So yeah, I mean, I was
and
just like,
veteran.
that's my dad, and a veteran. Yeah. One of the stories that I loved from my dad's boyhood, he was a bum for 3 years. In 1929, of course, when the Great Depression hit, he couldn't stay home because his mom could not support him. He had to do something, so he went on the road. And,
how old was he?
Oh, he got a scholarship to kick field goals at Colorado University and was there for 1 year. Then the Depression hit. So he
Probably 18, 19.
a college kid, yeah,
Yeah.
right. So this is a great story. I think you'll like it.
Oh, I love stories.
He was coming on riding the rods on a train coming west, and it stopped. Of course, he didn't have any idea where it was. It was nighttime. So I rolled out. Riding the rods meant being underneath the car.
Right. You were holding on.
Holding on, yeah. And he rolled out, and it was a town, and so he walked downtown. Every town has a pool hall. So he was in Lordsburg, New Mexico, as it turns out. And there was a pool hall, and he went in the pool hall and trying to look, you know, not to be noticed. And there was a game going, and it was a money game. And he sat, as in the old-time pool halls, there was always a gallery for the old men in their three-piece suits to watch the games.
Oh, right.
And so Dad watched this game, and the guy won and took his dollar from the other guy and kind of looked around like anybody else. And Dad said, could I get into the game? He said, yeah, come on, $1. Well, Dad had $1. Put his dollar on the...
That was a lot of money, too.
Oh, yes, are you kidding? That was going to probably get him for 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So he puts his dollar on the rail of the pool table, and the guy, since, of course, he was the recent victor, got to break the rack. And they were playing 8-ball, which is an awful game. But he got a good break where 3 or 4 other balls went down, and then he was very quickly, in a couple of shots, able to shoot out and win. Dad didn't hesitate. In the old-time pool halls, they always had wires with wooden beads on them, like a rosary.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
You reach up with your cue, and you could knock beads over to count things.
Mm-hmm.
So Dad just reached up and knocked a bead over for that guy. And Dad got to break this time. And so he broke the balls and ran the table. And so the guy kind of bristled and did it again and again till the guy didn't have any more money. Then the guys who were watching went out into the town to get other men from the town to come down and deal with this ringer.
What a fantastic...
So Dad said he spent the remainder of the night till 4 o'clock in the morning playing pool, beating everyone and taking all their money. And he said he left that town with every dollar he thinks that was loose in that town.
Do you remember what the town was?
Lordsburg.
Oh, wow.
Lordsburg, New Mexico. So yeah, he was just an amazing guy. So, and well, not just short. My mom, she was just an amazing person. I grew up in the company of two saints. They were not saints in the pious sense, but they were just excellent human beings. Dad was courageous. Mom was loving, nurturing. She was Irish. Her mom and dad were Irish immigrants. And she was redheaded and fiery Irish. God love her.
And what was your dad? What was his ethnic background?
My dad was the child of a man who was connected to the first Englishman to come across with a church letter to start the Quaker Church in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
That was his great-great-great-grandfather. So his lineage down that side was quite patrician, where my mom's was just solid, dirt poor Irish. Yeah. And what a great home to grow up in. Exemplary human beings.
Yeah. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. One of my brothers was killed, unfortunately, in a car accident. So I still have a brother surviving and 2 sisters.
Oh, very good. Well, you guys have longevity in your family.
Well, no kidding. That's the truth.
Yeah, we have longevity in our family, too. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, that was long ago and far away.
When did you lose your dad?
Dad died in 1978. Mom died in 1984. So they've been dead a long time.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's morbid.
I don't think I ever knew that. I don't think I ever knew when you lost
But
him.
that I've got a wonderful picture of my dad when he was about a 12-year-old with a newsboy cap and a pair of bib overalls and barefooted with his pants legs rolled up with his .22 rifle and his dog Bobby, who was a long-lived dog. I think Bobby lived to be 20, so he was essentially, my dad was an only child. And so his companion for
I don't think I knew that.
all of his growing up years was this wonderful collie. But that's just so emblematic. This is my dad. You can pick out in that photograph, you can just imagine, this is going to be this is going to be this. Okay. I'm sorry for telling these stories, and shame on me, but what the hell.
No, I'm glad you're doing it.
This is a great story about my dad. He, of course, in 1925, 26, when he was in high school, the hottest thing for boys was flying airplanes. I mean, airplanes were the absolute cutting edge of coolness. And of course, this little town of Grand Junction, Colorado, they had one airplane. It was owned by a guy who did crop dusting. So all my dad and his pals would hang out at the airport and hang on every word this guy said and help him roll the plane out of the hangar and gas it up, and just to be around the idea of being around an airplane. Beside the hangar was this old World War I Jenny, which was a World War I fighter. But of course, stripped of all its armament. It was sitting there. And Dad said, "What's with that plane?" He said, "Oh, that's just an old plane." He said, "I was thinking about restoring it." An old Curtiss Jenny. And Dad said, "Well, can we help you?" He said, "Sure." So the kids pitched in and they did everything, refabricated, rebuilt the engine, everything needed to be done. But when they got done, the guy didn't really have anything to do with it. So Dad and his friends said, "Could we buy this from you?" He said, "Well, yeah, sure, you could. You guys put a lot of work into this. How about $100?" Which was a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
So they managed to cobble together the $100. Three boys bought this airplane. They were maybe 17 years old. And okay, now we need to know how to fly it. So the pilot would take one kid at a time. It was a 2-seater up and show them how the controls work. Stick forward, stick back, pedal. And then how you land. Did that a couple of times with each kid. And then said, "Okay, so who wants to try it on his own?"
Oh my God.
Well, my dad said, I like to go. So get in. He said, "Okay, well, you've got a full tank of gas. Now, all you have to do to take off is just run the engine up, full throttle, and then just pull back on the stick and hang on, because it's going to take off." And he said, you've got a tank of gas when you're up there to learn how to fly this thing, to practice all the maneuvers that we've practiced. Turn right, turn left, all the things. And he said, and when you come back, let one of the other boys go up. So Dad did everything perfectly, came in, made a decent landing, but at one point he hit the brakes and he shouldn't have, and the plane went nose forward and broke the propeller, which is a minor thing. The kid said, I don't want to go up. So Dad bought their shares. And I got an airplane now. How cool am I? So he spent the next year or year and a half in the summer flying around little towns in eastern Utah, western Colorado to county fairs, taking people up for a ride, for $1 a ride.
What a great story.
So he ended up with 15,000 hours on his license. Jet qualified, multi-engine qualified, you know.
Those kinds of things can't happen today.
No.
I don't think so.
No, those can't happen.
Yeah, those things
There's
can't
too much
happen.
serendipity in it.
There's too much serendipity in it, and it also, that kind of freedom of childhood is gone.
Yes, it is.
And I don't think it's ever coming back.
My son Jamie and I talk about this a lot. He said, you know, Dad, he said, what I say is that the modern generation of the middle school kids I see, they're all had phone-based childhoods.
That's right.
And he said, you and Mom gave us play-based childhoods.
Play-based, yes.
Where when summer came, they were out on their own, doing whatever they wanted. They knew when to come back when it was supper time.
Yes, I had the same thing.
Yeah.
I remember, when we used to go back, we went back every year for vacation back to Colorado and for vacation, and we'd be up in the mountains, and I would leave at 8:00 in the morning, and we would always be near a lake.
Yeah.
And I would go fishing, I would go swimming, I would go hiking. I was by myself.
Yeah.
And Kent and I talked about this in a previous podcast because we talked about baseball, sociology of baseball, Kent Bausman. But I talked about the meaning of play.
Mm-hmm.
And in my view, play is so absolutely crucial.
I think play
for children.
I think neurology may know, or they will find out, that play finishes a lot of the neural connections that you need to have in order to be successful in life and happy.
And in order to be free.
Yes.
Yes, in order to know what actual freedom is. And I mean, my parents, I just read an article the other day about a woman in Georgia who let her kid walk into town, and she's being arrested.
Yes, she's being arrested.
Because she let him walk into town, and it was a mile away.
Unbelievable.
And you're just going, oh,
what have we turned into?
My parents would be arrested and put into jail.
Every day.
Every single day. I mean, oh my God, and if they knew some of the things I was up to. But,
yeah.
But play is so important because it's where that inner life that we talked about earlier gets developed as well. You're making your own decisions. You're looking. I always used to go to the woods, and I would just look around for stuff, and watch the birds and watch for wildlife, and that was really important. I mean, my daughter's childhood wasn't the same as mine. I was free.
Yeah. When I was a 5-year-old, my dad was drafted in 1943 at the advanced age of 33 with 3 kids, which was a huge mistake. The Army admitted it was a mistake, but they didn't undo it. So off he went to the war, and my mom got a job driving a bus for the Air Force, Army Air Corps, because we had a big Air Corps base in Colorado Springs, and we lived right near it. And as it turned out, that they had surrounded the entire base, which was several miles square, with a chain link fence and barbed wire on top. Then there was a buffer zone between the base and housing and streets and all of about 100 yards that was simply let go wild. which was full of brambles and weeds and so on. Well, are you kidding? Paradise for kids. So Mom would go to work at 8 or so in the morning and leave a lunch in the icebox for us, and we were on our own. Well, of course, what we did is immediately took off for the weeds, and since we get letters from the front, what our dads were doing, dug foxholes and played war. But then one of the funny things that happened was that one day one of the guys came over to our war zone and he said, "Look what I've got." He's got a bottle half full of whiskey. We said, "Where'd you get that?" He said, "Well, down by the road." So there was a road from the city street into the base that went through gates, of course, with sentries. And when the boys at the base, 19-year-olds, would be sent into town on Friday on Liberty, they would, of course, chase girls and get drunk. And then they had to be back on the base, and they would get into buses and go back, and they could not bring alcohol onto the base. They threw it in the weeds, and of course the boys then began combing the weeds, looking as well for cigar butts. And each of our foxholes had a liquor cabinet, and cigar butts and cigarette butts and matches. So all that summer, we were over there swigging, smoking all day. We were seriously addicted. Well, my dad, finally, they were able to heal his injuries, and he was discharged and he came home. And he right away wanted to know what we were doing taking off. So he followed us one day. And I remember sitting in my foxhole, with
the paterfamilias' home.
And the weeds parting. And there's my dad. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" Oh my God. So he grabbed my shirt and my brother's shirt, and jerked us up out of the foxhole. Home we go. He says, "If I ever see you again over in those weeds," his famous statement, "you're going to be sorry."
Oh my God, my dad used to say the same thing.
So we couldn't resist. I mean, the whole thing, pink elephants, I mean, so we finally, Chuck and I couldn't resist. We later planned where we would go the opposite way in the morning, and then we would hook around and come back to the foxholes. And about 10 minutes in, there's my dad. This time, he's got 2 stove-length pieces of firewood in his hands and jerked us up out of that. Of course, a 5-year-old boy is all torso and no legs. and
5 is pretty young, by the way.
And so us running, my dad was able to keep up with us simply walking, and it was like little kid polo, whack, whack, whack. Oh, I'll never forget. I still vividly remember that beating. And that convinced me that I was never going to go back to the foxhole. But can you imagine kids nowadays doing anything like that?
No, I cannot.
My God.
No, I cannot.
So anyway, yeah, a play-based childhood.
Yeah, that's an extreme form of play.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to have to do another part to this.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Sure, I got nothing to do.
Yeah, so let's. Well, you and I will talk about when we can get together again, because we've still got a lot we can talk about.
Oh yeah.
And I want to get some. I want to get some more stories. So, Wick, thanks so much for coming today.
My privilege. And
I really appreciate it. And by the way, everybody who will be listening to this, he's a riot. I mean, I really appreciate you doing this. He always goes along with my projects. I'm always having projects, and Wick has always been a major supporter of mine. So thanks very much. I appreciate it. And so we'll see you next time, and take care.